Unaussprechlichen Ramblen.
My name is Marco Visconti, and through this podcast I will invite fellow magicians, occultists, artists, and mystics to ramble along with them and my supporters on Patreon. By doing so, I hope to introduce you all to a much wider perspective on magic than what we get nowadays from occult social media, which is frankly beginning to feel very stale, repetitive, and uninspired. If you want to be part of one of the next episodes, join us on Patreon at patreon.com/Marco Visconti by pledging at the Yesod tier or above. And now, on with the unspeakable rambles. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 11th episode of Unaussprechlichen Ramblen. It's been 1 year since we started this little adventure in podcasting. It's been a fun ride so far. So many things have changed in the last year, and I guess we're living in interesting times because somebody has cursed us, clearly. We could have lived in the most boring times. Instead, we are definitely experiencing interesting periods. Our guest tonight is Giulia Turolla. Giulia is a person that I met, like 10, 12 years ago, many years ago. It feels like several lifetimes ago, actually, given everything that happened. But as usual, for the format of the podcast, I will introduce her with the words that she chose to introduce herself. And so, Giulia says that I'm a contemporary witch, a priestess, and a teacher in the Ara Tradition. I graduated with honors in classical letters and archaeology and cultures of the ancient world from Alma Mater Studiorum, University of Bologna. My personal path focuses on the practice of witchcraft as an indigenous form of shamanism and aims to rediscover and rebuild the sacred net that binds us to the spirits and the gods of the place we live in. As a researcher of European witchcraft and magic in the ancient world, I have participated in many conferences and events, both national and international. I remember, hello Giulia, how are you doing? Last time I saw you, you were in a conference here in London.
Yeah, right before COVID, wasn't it?
Yes, it was my birthday weekend. It's the first weekend of June for the Magical Women Conference. That was a great night.
Yeah, and I'm very happy to have been there. Also because after, of course, COVID hit and then Brexit hit, and so
And
now
then
I am.
The rest of the world did exactly.
Yeah, and now now I am a dirty EU immigrant, and so I don't know when I will be able to go there again.
I love the fact that we're like 5 minutes into the podcast. We already said something completely unacceptable. Perfect. I love it. That's it. That's what we Italians do. So. Where do we go from here? First of all, it's a pleasure to have you here tonight with us. And I would say, why don't we remember us the time when we first met? What was that? It was a Pagan Pride Pagan Pride Day, right?
Yeah, it was a Pagan Pride Day a lifetime ago. I think it was at least 10 years ago.
I think it was like 2009 or 10. So yeah, you're right.
Yes.
It was. I mean, we remember when like the world was a different place. Everything was beautiful.
Yeah.
It wasn't really. It's
no.
And apparently, you always like to remind me that one of the first proper interaction we had was me asking you to drink because you were making mead or something like that?
Yeah, no, actually that interaction really showed your scale of values, because listen, there was this very nice guy who had brought his mead with him, like homemade mead, and he wasn't sloppy like me. He really did the whole process of fermentation and so on and so on, whereas I am a different kind of girl, and I just brought a mead that was less time consuming but way more alcoholic, like 3 times more, and you were there sipping that mead, and I was sharing mine, and I asked you, do you want some? And you said, with a very aristocratic face, you said, oh no, thank you, I'm all I'm done. I have mine here. And I said, yes, but mine, is way more alcoholic. And you tasted it immediately, of course. And then you just dropped the other one on the ground as if it suddenly became piss, And that was how we met.
That is something that happened, and I remember it very fondly. It's what one of the things we do on this podcast is that we have no filters. Like on this podcast, I invited old people that I consider friends, and we're just like no filters whatsoever. I think at some point I will get kicked out of Spotify for the things we say here, but you know what? We're gonna live dangerously. Now that we set the tone, I would like to ask you everything about you, really. Maybe not everything. Let's start with the Ara tradition. This is something that, I know about it because I was exposed to it. I was never an initiate like you are, but I was exposed to it during the years that we were both going to the Pagan Pride Day. And by the way, if those of you listening don't know what it is, the Pagan Pride Day was, I guess it still is, an event organized in Rome every autumn equinox. And for the longest time, it was the only neo-pagan esoteric event in Italy. Full stop. There was nothing else. It started in 2001. And I remember attending it the first ones, and then I really started to become one of the people that got involved in the organization of it. More like running the day around 2007, 2008, and so when me and Giulia met, I was really like I was one of the people helping on the things going. I was doing some of my first seminars on what the Linda Falorio's Tree of Night actually was done at the Pagan Pride, and then we had a couple of I was like kind of retreats during the summer when we went to the Temple of Nemi. I don't know if you were there actually.
No, I wasn't there, but I have been told many interesting stories about that. But
yeah, let's never recall. I mean, if you weren't there, that's good. We can pass on. Yes, many a thing happened in the Temple of Diana in Nemi, but we will remind them another day. I will do a solo podcast. So anyway, I was exposed to the Ara tradition and Phyllis Currott, which was, if I'm not mistaken, is the high priestess that started the tradition. What can you tell us more about it?
Of course, like in Italy, we have the Tempio di Ara, which is the Italian branch, so to say, of the Temple of Ara tradition. And the Temple of Ara is a tradition that stems, from Wicca, as Phyllis Currott has a Gardnerian lineage, and she was initiated into the Minoan tradition in New York. But actually, at the same time in which she was doing her training into this Minoan tradition, she was also training with the very first circle, the guinea pigs, so to say, of Michael Arner's, that was just starting with his experimentation with core shamanism. Of what would later become, the foundation for shamanic studies. And so for Phyllis, it was like quite natural. It was not like she got this training into initiatory Wicca, and then she decided, to spice things up and put a little bit of shamanism into it. It was like the two things were really intertwined from the very beginning. And it's also a tradition that it's like we recognize, sometimes here I am going to say more unacceptable things. I really,
please.
You called me for this, right?
Exactly. I mean, there was a segment I used to do on Instagram called Magic and Spice. So you can imagine, please bring the spice, all of it.
It's like, very often, in Italy, especially, we have this kind of discussions like, oh, is this really Wicca, or is it something else? Can you call it Wicca? And so on and so on and so on. And so, we don't really like to be all bashful about it. Of course, it stems from initiatory Wicca. It would be very dumb to say something else. Like many other people do, like, they take very freely from what is Wicca or other neo-pagan traditions, and then they try to hide it by using different names and titles, which is of course ridiculous for everyone that has done a little bit of groundwork. But at the same time, it's also true that the Ara tradition really went another way in many different ways, like there has been some sort of deconstruction made about what we at least perceive to be some of the most patriarchal, parts of Wicca, and also parts that are still very rooted in a vision of the world and of spirits that is pretty monotheistic in a way, and the detachment between spirit and matter, and so on and so on and so on. And so I couldn't argue if someone came to me, like someone who is following, of course, what in America is called the British traditional Wicca, but it's just Gardnerian or Alexandrian Wicca in Europe, and would come to me and say, but like, you are not really Wicca, you can't call yourself Wicca anymore. That's fine by me. Like, I don't give a shit, And I can also agree. In fact, to a point, I agree with them, and that's why I don't say I am a high priestess of Wicca, because it wouldn't be entirely correct. So that's the thing. And I guess I used to joke, but it's not really a joke. It's there is a very big chunk of truth in that I think I ended up in the Ara tradition for two main reasons. And one of them is that I think that Phyllis is not only a wonderful teacher, but also a wonderful human being. And in the Ara tradition, I have met some of the best people I have really met in the so-called occult or neo-pagan community. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. We are still here after years and years and years, and we are not at each other's throat, which is, I think, I think it's pretty rare. And the
coming from the OTO, yes, I can tell you it's pretty rare.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like same story everywhere. And the other reason I think is that they would have me as I am, which, as you know, is not something so easy to find.
Easy to accept, yeah. Absolutely. One thing that I want to ask you is, you mentioned, right, that Phyllis Curt's background, and so what transpired in the Ara tradition has many, I mean, it stems from Wicca in a way, or at least, like almost like, I don't want to say like reconstructive witchcraft, but let's say a witchcraft-like practice, and the more shamanic approach, like from Michael Harner and onwards. What I noticed is that, back when we first met, but even before, right, there was not so much discussion about the working with spirits, working with the genius loci, working with like shamanism was still something that was kind of like scoffed in neo-pagan communities. Possibly it changed from the very beginnings, because when I speak with some Gardnerians here in London that have ties with Gardner First Coven, they always tell me, no, actually, the original Gardnerian tradition is very shamanic. It kind of like all the ceremonial part got added later. But what I'm getting there is that what I'm getting to say is that we're now living in a world where there's a lot of discourse around the genius loci. There's a lot of discourse around, working with spirit of place, with, walking and being in the land. So in many ways, we can say that the Ara was a precursor to what happened now, pretty much. Do you think that, so people that are interested in that kind of approach to magic, less lodge and more wood, if you want, can find a good place to be in the Ara tradition? Or should there be other things to tick, right? Other boxes to tick?
Well, I think that I'm not joking when I say that the main, prerequisite to really find yourself at home in the Ara tradition is having a fucking sense of humor. Because if you don't have that, you don't survive long. But apart from that, I would say that it's true what you're saying about, nowadays And of course, there are trends, you know, in magic, like in everything else. And shamanism and animism have been the big thing for a while. And now, as we will see later, you know, folk Catholicism and so on and so on. I think that what I really like about the Ara tradition is that there is a sort of a core, you know, method, a way in which you approach spirits and you approach magic that is common to everybody, and sort of a vision of what magic should be and what our role as human beings that practice magic in this world, how it should be. But at the same time, you also have lots of freedom. Like, for example, I am a person, I have probably between the teachers and the priestesses and priests of the Temple of Ara, I am the one that is most interested in, like, also, you know, ceremonial magic and of course ancient magical techniques and very folk, you know, so say traditional, as much as we can say that, witchcraft. But for me, like, I don't feel that all these elements are disconnected in my practice, and it all fits very well into the mold of the Tempio di Ara in Italy. Yeah. But other people have different focuses. So it's not like it's a tradition in which you need to choose between, I don't know, being, you know, immersed in nature and just communicating with nature spirits, yeah, or, you know, having dealing with the demons or different kind of spirits. You can do it all as long as the frame of your work is the same.
Gotcha. I understand. Well, it seems like it's something that possibly some of you listening to this could be interested in. And again, I will leave the links in the description below, as you used to say, so that everybody who's curious can go and find themselves into this new experience. Now, you mentioned something that I know that we were going to get there eventually. So you mentioned folk Catholicism, right? There has been a lot of chat and discourse around folk Catholicism in the last few months, and I had to say my part, obviously, as always happens, and I did a couple of videos, one video on YouTube, where I was addressing what I personally find problematic as an Italian growing up in Italy, trying to find my way into magical culture and the various esoteric milieus. I always faced a big problem, and the big problem was that Italian culture is steeped in Catholicism, and that means it's steeped in bigotry, it's steeped in abuse, it's steeped in violence. Most people listening to this, you may not realize that you could get a lot of shit for being an occultist, a witch, a pagan in Italy up until maybe, I mean, I'm pretty sure it still happens in smaller towns, but I grew up in Rome and I was getting shit up until the mid-2000s, to be fair. Then things started to even themselves out a little bit, but the problem is that there's always a huge component of reactionary worldview in Italy. And I was thinking in every Catholic country, because when I speak with Poles, when I speak with Irish people, when I speak with people in Spain, they all tell me the same, right? The point is that why is everybody so fascinated with folk Catholicism right now? And I'm not speaking about those strands of folk Catholicism that really are ATR, you know, or African diaspora religions. I'm not speaking of Santeria, of Lukumi. I'm not speaking of Hoodoo. I'm speaking of white Americans mostly thinking that Catholicism is magic and cool and witchy. So what do you have to say on that?
I mean, if you put everything, you know, side by side with Protestant Christianity, everything seems very esoteric, right, and occult and magical, because I think that's probably like if you would ask an AI to create a magicless religion, you would probably end up with something very, very similar to that. So I think that's part of the fascination, you know, the fact that, of course, you know, if you look at the history of magic, everything that is foreign that sounds very exotic is, of course, it's a plus, you know. And I think that it also pairs up with the fact that in the later years, at least in the last decade, people have become more and more aware about the issue of cultural appropriation. And so going to find this exotic, you know, element in ATR, like you were saying, or other types of traditional indigenous, so to say, magic and traditions and so on and so on, has become more problematic. And of course, you know, folk Catholicism and Catholicism can be perceived as some sort of solution, I think. Like you get to get that foreign exotic element, but at the same time, you are not appropriating, because how can you appropriate from a religion that has been so wildly, very often violently, you know, imperialistic? So that's one point. And there is also another point that I think is like cultural difference between Europeans and Americans, but also Italians and other Europeans. But I don't know if you want to delve into that.
Well, I mean, one thing that I would like to ask you, as a practicing witch and as an Italian, right? What are the differences that you see between what we know of Italian witchcraft, that is, what we call stregoneria? I also pronounce it kind of English. I don't know why. I'm Italian, and you know, and I don't know. That's the stregoneria of Raven Grimassi, because we. For those of you who are not on YouTube, on because you don't see the video, Giulia just face palmed hard. So anyway, I need to ask you that, because I'm telling you, I'm still seeing a lot of people in the occult sphere nowadays trying to find, no, I don't want to say justifications, but just I don't even want to say that, trying to say, you know, like the stregoneria of Raven Grimassi is valid. It could be valid, right? You know, at the end of the day, we're working with myth, we're working myth creation and tools, you know, magical tools. I mean, I would argue that you can create a religion out of everything, but I still see people that say that is the real Italian tradition. What can you tell us?
I have a very strong opinions about this.
I'm happy to hear.
No, you know, as you were saying, the issue is not really like, I get very often, I get the impression that especially American people, and I'm sorry, I'm saying American, but of course I mean people from the USA. They have this idea in their mind, they feel self-defensive up to a point, because I think that they think we are trying to tell them that they're not allowed, you know, to touch those practices, and that we have the one and only way, you know, the one and only Italian witchcraft. That's their idea. Like I found very, very emblematic the fact that, do you remember there was that awful show, like Luna Nera, you know? Yeah, it was awful.
For those of you, wait a second. For those of you who don't know, if you have a VPN, you can access Netflix Italy. I don't know why you would want to do it, but if you do it, you can watch a show that is dubbed in English as well, called Luna Nera, but it's Dark Moon, Black Moon. And now Giulia's gonna tell us what she thinks about.
Yeah, no, I didn't have the fortitude to actually watch it, you know, but there was this review, I think it was on The Wild Hunt. And right there at the beginning, it was explained that this, you know, series was talking about stregoneria, which is actually, you know, I don't remember exactly the phrasing, but it was like stregoneria is actually very ancient and serious tradition in Italy, and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And so, of course, I couldn't, you know, stay
you
silent.
couldn't bring yourself.
No? And I made a comment saying, listen, you know, stregoneria is fine. I mean, if you want to follow that, that's fine by you, if it works for you. But please don't say that it's a very ancient and serious Italian tradition of witchcraft, because it simply is not. Like, it's false, you know. And I remember this man answered me very, he was very angry, and he was arguing as if I was trying to say that, our witchcraft or my witchcraft, or I don't know what he was thinking about, is the only one. But the fact is that, that's a straw man argument. The fact is that there is no such thing as the Italian tradition of stregheria or stregoneria or witchcraft. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in Italy. It doesn't exist in the US. It doesn't exist anywhere in that way, in the way in which we think of, a tradition, like when we speak about neo-pagan traditions, or I don't know, esoteric orders, or in that, structured way. It doesn't exist. And so, as you were saying, of course, stregheria can work, everything can work. But the Jedi cult can work.
I must see it, please. No Jedi, thank you.
But the issue is when you try to present it as something, it is not. And of course, you try to present it in that way because you have something to gain. And there is that, exotic and foreign element we were speaking about before. And that is very of course, stregheria, Raven Grimassi stregheria, almost nobody knows it about it in Italy. And those who know it are pretty much angry about it.
You know what? Something that came to my mind, actually, because by the way, Jessica is telling us that Lunanera is on Netflix UK.
Yeah.
If you want to do that.
You are so lucky. You can watch it too.
Actually, Jessica also wanted to ask you a question, and that she would like to know how your work in academia has influenced you in any way in your practice. And for instance, she makes the point of thinking of the work of Carlo Ginzburg, which is obviously it's been one of the landmark professors in ethno studies, and the Menandanti are mentioned in the Lunanera. So I think this is the perfect cue in from Lunanera to Carlo Ginzburg and the academia. How do you reconcile your academic work and your practical work, magical work?
Well, of course, my academic training, I think, has made me more of a pain in the ass, both towards myself and towards others, of course. So I couldn't cop out in a way by believing that this and that were, these ancient traditional cults passed on by these beautiful women, etc., etc. But in a way, it has not been that much of a struggle, at least for me. It's not still today, because, of course, scholarly speculation only goes so far. And I was joking with a friend of mine a while ago that very, very often when I read, some scholarly speculation about this spell or that traditional magical technique, and they are there arguing, many different scholars arguing over the same point, and you go there, and as a practitioner, it's evident, what the meaning of that passage is. Or that was very funny, because I remember these two scholars arguing with one another, why this, practitioner, this very, very old practitioner, has decided to do this when in this other manual, this technique is described in this other way. And they were trying to find very, very strange, outlandish reasons. But the reason is that it was obvious that that was an idiot and he just got it wrong. He copied it in the wrong way and he didn't understand what he was supposed to do. So I think that's actually the part that I like the most about what I do, making the two things, walk hand in hand. For example, in this last, there is this course, this online course that I teach on female witchcraft in the ancient world. And there is it's mostly, archaeological and historical stuff. Of course, presented for people that don't have necessarily a training in the field. But in the end, like, I put in a bonus work because I just couldn't stop myself. And we did this, I was discussing the fact that we have so very few clear informations about what the original drawing down the moon by Thessalian witches was supposed to be. And we decided with the very restricted group of wonderful witches friends to do this necromancy operation with the spirits of Thessalian witches. And I put it in there because, like, you know, it was obvious for me. It was a normal
thing to do. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but it's also very important for me to, like we were saying with Stregheria, you know, to keep things very clear. Like, this is, you know, historical work, archaeological work. These are the sources, and this is my own magical work, or I don't know how you want to call it, UPG, whatever, you know. Yeah. But honesty about that is paramount. That is one of my really big pet peeves, you know, when people are not clear about the boundaries between these two fields.
Well, okay. So I would say you pretty much single-handedly solved the problem of ethic versus emic approach in ethnography, right? It's like, it's just perfect. Like, we got it. We got it, folks. That's it. You were mentioning that you're teaching courses online. This is something new. Where can this be found? Usually I always ask this question at the end, but it's here. No. Tell us where all of this. What do you teach online? Where can we find it?
Well, actually, I've just entirely renovated my website, which is boscodiartemisia.com. And
I will put the thing in the description
because I understand
Bosco di Artemisia, but I think it's 3 people here understand what you're saying.
And actually, I have decided to, like, I was offering my online courses that, of course, you know, are all spacing inside my range of interests. So ancient magical techniques and ancient magical materia. I am also translating right now a course that I offered that is about working with green spirits, so spirits of the plants. But I also decided, since I was offering my own courses in 2 languages, like both Italian and English, to do the same thing, because I know so many great teachers that are, you know, either Italian and they don't know English, or they are English, American, Anglophone, and they don't know Italian. And so I decided to get in touch with these people that are usually also friends, and to act as a translator as well. So I am also translating these people courses, if they're Anglophone into Italian, and if they're Italian into English. But and that's the way in which this academy, you know, is evolving. But I am not going to enlarge it too much because, because I like to keep a close circle of both good teachers and good practitioner, and also, I think, good human beings.
That's a very good point. I mean, in many ways, I guess you can tell that's the way that's the approach I'm having with this podcast, right? Like, trying to have not like one episode a week, but one episode a month, when I just get people that they're interesting. Thank you. We will definitely link out Bosco di Artemisia, which, by the way, for you Anglophones listening to this, it means Artemisia's woods. I think that's the way you would describe. There's another thing that you do, and it's a question that comes from Logan here. You create drums and ritual tool, like you make them from scratch, right?
Yeah.
So if you can tell us a little bit how you started crafting this, what even moved you to provide this service, and also what advices you would provide to others that craft their own tools. I mean, this is maybe a big question, but craft tools is something that everybody loves. I mean, that's why one of the reasons why a lot of people get into magic, to have like a nice sword and or I don't know, a nice wand, and especially like drums. I mean, of course, drums.
That's very Freudian of you.
Well, let's not go there. This is definitely a PG-13 episode tonight. So tell us about how you come to ritual tool crafting and drums crafting. So.
Well, that's very simple. Like, I wanted to make my own drum. I wanted to make it myself, also because I had very strange requirements, and I wouldn't want to ask them to anybody else. And
What requirements?
I'm not going to tell you.
Damn it.
And so I am very lucky because my husband is one of those people, we say in Italy, was golden hands. Like he can learn to do pretty much everything when it's handmade. And we tried to learn together how to make these drums more than 10 years ago, and we really liked the process. So we started doing them for us, and then how it is, friends asked us. And like, I like crafting ritual tools in general, but I think that drums are really my favorite because it's really an act of witchcraft, and I never was one of those people who feel the struggle between doing and studying. When I study something, I also want to do it, and same goes. So like, I can't explain it to you, but it's very down and dirty. You get your hands into what is essentially dead skin, and you put it inside the water, and it really smells, like dead animals. It really smells like the wild. And at the same time, a finished drum, like, the thing that I really love is that people come to me telling me about, I don't know, the visions they had or the experiences they had, whatever you want to call them, depending on the path they are on, and their vocabulary. And what I do is I try to give a body, to what their experiences were, to the spirit that they have already got in touch with, that is already in touch with them, and that just needs a physical body. And that is the process. It's very myotical, you would say. And right now I am like, of course, it's very time consuming. And so that's why I am only keeping, this part. I am reducing and working only with the custom made order, because that's the part that I really
Of course, I can imagine, like, if it would be almost impossible to just, I guess, conjure any spirit, like to do a series of drums, right? I mean, maybe it's
possible,
but
no, I mean, it's possible, but they would be spirits that are just, how can I say, that are in touch with me, and that are not necessarily going to find the right person for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I get it.
And also, I am not interested, like, we, of course, especially at first, we received many requests from people asking to get that drum in that native style, and so on, or drums with just awful designs on them, like pop stuff. But we don't do that. Like, for example, I refuse to do drums that have designs, or that take from symbolism that comes from still alive, still thriving indigenous traditions. Because I mean, there are lots of artisans that can do that for you, and that can make justice to that culture, which is not, it's not mine, so it doesn't make any sense.
No, I get it. It's good to have this kind of approach, because I mean, the occult world is full of, let's say, charlatans. Let's put it like that. So, one final question for you tonight, and this is from Peter. I love Peter because Peter's questions are always interesting. So, if you could travel through space and time to participate or observe magical rituals at one place and time in the ancient world, what would you pick?
Oh, that's very hard. Also because, of course, as a person with a training in history, you always think about, you don't have this idealized idea of the past, and so you always think about the pitfalls of every historical
Where am I
time.
going into the past where I'm less likely to be killed for any reason?
Exactly, or to be raped, or to die of childbirth. Oh, that's very hard. On the one hand, on the one hand, one of the historical periods that have always very deeply fascinated me is what is actually the hotbed of the magical culture that we know today, which is the 1st century CE, when there was all this renaissance of grimoires. And so I guess that I would choose either 1st century CE in Alexandria, in Egypt. But at the same time, my heart also tells me that I would dearly, dearly, dearly love to go and participate to the very famous orgies that were kept by the daughter of Augusto, Ottaviano Augusto, so Augustus in Rome, and she's also my namesake. She's Giulia, and so
I can see the Lupercalia and the Saturn. That could be an interesting. It's funny because I was thinking about it myself, and I was being boring actually because I was thinking about the Eleusinian mysteries, but then again, we know nothing about them, so possibly I was putting myself into very in a danger zone. Or I don't know, maybe it would be nice to see the rituals of the Golden Dawn as well as they were doing, but that's because that's my background, I would say. I don't know. Up until we don't get a proper way of traveling in the past or in the future, but we don't know anything about the future. Anyway, I'm thinking about the fact that
the future doesn't look so bright, right now. So.
But right now, not so much. Anyway, Giulia, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Once again, where can people find you?
Well, they can find me, of course, on social media, like I am on Facebook with my own name, so Giulia Turolla, but also with the name of my website, which is Bosco di Artemisia. Yeah, and also on Instagram and on my website. And if people want to get in touch with me, they can also get in touch with me at the email that is listed in my website.
Fantastic. I will link all of them because again, Bosco di Artemisia makes sense for us, but not so much for the listeners. So I would say please go in and take a look at Giulia's website. It's fantastic. She's offering something that no one else is offering. The kind of like courses you're offering right now, I haven't seen anybody doing. So if you're interested into this in very, very beautiful, Venn diagram of magic and history and archaeology, that's the place to be. Once again, thank you, Giulia, for being with us tonight. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for having me.
See you at the next Ramble.